Brett raised a glass of vintage Dom Perignon to his blushing bride, looking every bit the billionaire heir he pretended to be. He had no idea the credit card used to buy that bottle had been declined 20 minutes ago. He thought he was starting his new life. I was standing in the shadows with a manila folder that proved he was actually ending it. The music was loud, classical, and expensive, but the silence coming in 5 minutes would be deafening. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. 6 months before the wedding that would end him, I was standing in line at a Trader Joe's on a Tuesday evening, worrying about organic spinach. That was my life. I worried about spinach, I worried about the electric bill, and I worried about whether Brett was eating enough fiber. I watched the cashier scan my items. Beep, beep, beep. It was a hypnotic rhythm. I had a carton of almond milk, a bag of frozen chicken, and a bottle of the red wine Brett liked, the one that cost $20, which felt like a splurge, but was necessary because he'd been so stressed at work lately. "That will be $64.50, the cashier said. She was a teenager with bright purple hair and a nose ring, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else in the world. I smiled, that automatic, polite smile women are trained to wear, and slid my chip card into the reader. I waited. I thought about the laundry piling up at home. I thought about how I needed to schedule a dentist appointment. The machine buzzed, a harsh, angry noise. "Card error," the girl said, popping her gum. "Try it again." My stomach did a little flip, just a small one. It was probably the chip. The chip was always finicky. I pulled it out, wiped it on my jeans, a superstitious little ritual, and inserted it again. I pressed down harder this time, as if physical pressure could force the banking system to cooperate. "Processing," I whispered to myself. Buzz. Declined. The flip in my stomach turned into a knot. I could feel the heat rising up my neck. I knew there was money in that account. I checked the balance every Friday like clockwork. We had over $8,000 in the checking account. We were saving for a down payment on a lake house. "Do you have another card?" the cashier asked. Her boredom was shifting into annoyance. I could feel the presence of the people behind me. A woman with a crying baby. A man in a suit checking his watch. They were judging me. They were thinking, "Look at this woman who can't even pay for her frozen chicken." I don't understand, I stammered. I pulled out my wallet and dug for the backup card, the joint Visa we only used for emergencies. "Try this one." My hands were shaking. Why were my hands shaking? It was just a glitch. Banks have glitches. Maybe the system was down. I slid the second card in. I held my breath. I prayed to the gods of commerce. Buzz. Declined. "It says, 'Do not honor,'" the girl said, loud enough for the man in the suit to hear. "Do not honor?" What did that even mean? It sounded moral. It sounded like a judgment on my character. "I have cash," I said, my voice sounding thin and watery. "I have cash." I frantically dug through my purse, bypassing the wallet, searching the side pockets where I sometimes stashed emergency bills. I found 2 $20 bills and a 10, $50. "I'll put back the wine," I said, my face burning so hot I thought I might actually combust. "Just take off the wine." The walk to the car felt like a funeral procession. I sat in the driver's seat of my Honda Civic and just stared at the steering wheel. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Why would both cards decline? Identity theft. That had to be it. Someone had hacked us. Someone was draining our life savings right now while I was worrying about wine. I pulled out my phone to check the banking app. I tapped the icon. It loaded, the little circle spinning, mocking me. Login failed, invalid credentials. I stared at the screen. I typed my password again. Vicky B123. It was the same password I had used for 4 years. Login failed. The panic wasn't a knot anymore. It was a cold, oily liquid filling my lungs. I wasn't just embarrassed. I was locked out. I drove home 10 miles over the speed limit. When I burst through the front door, I expected chaos. I expected to find Brett on the phone with the police or the bank, dealing with the hackers. Instead, the house was quiet. The TV was on in the living room, some nature documentary about penguins. Brett was sitting on the beige sectional, his feet up, a half-drunk beer on the coaster. He looked so calm, so normal. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, babe, you're home late." I was about to order pizza. I dropped the grocery bags on the floor. The almond milk made a heavy thud. "Brett, something is wrong," I said, my voice trembling. "My cards declined, both of them, and I can't log into the bank. I think we've been hacked." Brett didn't jump up. He didn't gasp. He didn't reach for his phone. He just took a slow sip of his beer and set it down. He looked at me with this soft, pitying expression, the kind you give a toddler who dropped their ice cream cone. "Oh, honey," he said gently, "I meant to tell you. I changed the passwords this morning." My brain stopped. You changed them? Why? And why aren't the cards working?" He patted the spot on the sofa next to him. "Come here. Sit down. You're working yourself up again. You know how you get when you're stressed. Your face is all blotchy." I didn't sit. I stood there, vibrating with adrenaline. "Brett, I couldn't pay for groceries. I had to put the wine back. It was humiliating." "Why did you cut off the cards?" He sighed, a long, weary sound that made me feel like I was being unreasonable. He stood up and walked over to me, placing his hands on my shoulders. He began to massage my neck. "Victoria," he cooed, "listen to me. Remember last week when you were freaking out about the interest rates on the savings account? You were up until 2 in the morning reading about inflation." "I wasn't freaking out," I protested, though I felt my resolve weakening under his touch. "I was just concerned that we weren't maximizing our—" "Shh!" He silenced me, pressing a finger to my lips. "See? You obsess. You worry. It's bad for your health, babe. I talked to my dad, and he suggested a new wealth management strategy. I moved our liquid assets into a high-yield locked trust. It's for our future, for the lake house." "But why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to surprise you with how much we made in interest next month," he said, smiling that boyish smile that had charmed me 11 years ago. "And honestly, I wanted to take the burden off you. You work so hard. You shouldn't have to worry about numbers. I wanted to be the man, you know, take care of things. But the cards, Brett, I was stranded. I froze the old cards because they're issuing us new platinum ones linked to the trust," he explained smoothly. "They should be here in 2 days. I gave you that cash allowance last week, didn't I? I thought you were using that." I blinked. He had given me $300 in cash last week. I had used it to pay the gardener and get an oil change. "I spent it," I whispered. "See?" He chuckled, pulling me into a hug. "Money burns a hole in your pocket. It's okay. We'll tighten the belt for a few days until the new cards come. It's good for us. Builds character." I stood there, wrapped in his arms, smelling his expensive cologne. I should have felt relieved. He was handling it. He was taking care of our future. He was protecting me from my own anxiety. But deep down, in the reptilian part of my brain, something was screaming. Why did he change the password? "I need the new password, Brett," I said into his chest, "just so I can see." He pulled back and looked me in the eyes. His eyes were blue and clear and utterly void of guilt. "Babe, if I give it to you, you're just going to check it every 5 minutes. You're going to micromanage the trust. Let me handle this one thing. Can you trust your husband for once? Can you just let me take care of you?" He made it sound like a gift. He made my suspicion sound like a character flaw. I looked at his earnest face, and I felt a wave of shame. I was being controlling. He was trying to surprise me with a lake house, and I was yelling about almond milk. "Okay," I said quietly. "I trust you." He kissed my forehead. "Good girl. Now let's order that pizza. My treat. I have cash." 2 days passed. The platinum cards didn't arrive. I was sitting at the kitchen table on Thursday morning, staring at my laptop. Brett was in the shower. I could hear the water running. I had 20 minutes before he came downstairs. I opened the browser. I went to our bank's website. Username, Victoria B. Password, cursor blinking. I tried Lake House 2024. Login failed. I tried Brett and Vic Forever. Login failed. I tried his birthday. Brett 6185. Login failed. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I tried every combination of our names, our dog's name, who died 3 years ago, the street address, his mother's maiden name. Login failed. Your account has been temporarily locked due to excessive attempts. I sat back, my hands trembling. It wasn't just that I didn't know the password, it was the feeling of being erased. For 11 years, I had paid the bills. I balanced the checkbook. I was the one who reminded him to fund his IRA, and now with a few clicks, he had walled me out. I clicked, forgot password, security question. What was the name of your first pet? I typed, Buster. Answer, incorrect. I stared at the screen. Buster. It was Buster. I knew it was Buster. We had laughed about it on our first date because his first dog was also named Buster. I typed, Fluffy, Max, Spot. Answer, incorrect. He had changed the security questions. Why would you change the security questions if you were just moving money to a high-yield trust? You change security questions when you don't want someone getting back in. The water upstairs turned off. I slammed the laptop shut. I felt like a criminal in my own home. I stood up and started wiping down the counter, frantically, needing to look busy. When Brett walked into the kitchen, smelling of soap and confidence, I was aggressively scrubbing a coffee stain that wasn't there. Morning, beautiful, he said, grabbing an apple from the bowl. Cards should be here today. I checked the tracking. Great, I said, not looking at him. Can't wait. You okay? He asked, pausing. You look tense. Just work, I lied. Month-end reporting. Don't work too hard, he said, biting into the apple with a sickening crunch. Remember, I've got us covered now. It was 2 a.m. on a Saturday. The house was settling, making those ticking and creaking sounds that usually lulled me to sleep. But I wasn't sleeping. I was lying rigid on my side of the bed, staring at the sliver of moonlight coming through the blinds. Brett was snoring softly beside me, a rhythmic, peaceful sound, the sound of a man with a clear conscience. Then his phone buzzed. It was on the nightstand on his side. A short, sharp vibration against the wood. If it had been a year ago, I would have ignored it, or I would have rolled over and checked it to make sure his mom wasn't in the hospital. But tonight, the sound felt like a gunshot. I waited. He didn't stir. I moved slowly. I slid my hand out from under the duvet. I held my breath. I reached across the expanse of the mattress, terrified that the rustle of sheets would wake him. My fingertips touched the cold metal of his iPhone. I tilted it toward me. The screen was dark. I tapped it gently. It lit up. The brightness was blinding in the dark room. I squinted. There was a notification right in the center of the lock screen. It was from an app folder called Food and Dining. The icon was a slice of pepperoni pizza. The app name was Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut, your order is on the way. I frowned. We hadn't ordered pizza. We had grilled salmon for dinner. Then, underneath that generic notification, there was a subtext. A preview of the message inside the app. Pizza Hut, I miss your hands. Last night was incredible. Can't wait for Tuesday. My blood turned to ice. I miss your hands. Who says that to a pizza delivery driver? I stared at the words, trying to make them make sense. Maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe it was spam. But the notification was from the app itself. It wasn't a text message. It was an in-app chat. He was using the Pizza Hut app to communicate with someone. Smart. Terrifyingly smart. If I looked at his text messages, I'd find nothing. If I looked at his call log, I'd find nothing. But who checks the special instructions section of a pizza order? I tried to swipe to open it. Enter passcode. I typed 1 2 3/4. Incorrect. I typed his birthday. Incorrect. I typed our anniversary. 4122. Incorrect. He had changed his phone passcode too. The phone buzzed again in my hand. Another message from Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut. Are you asleep? Thinking about you. I felt bile rise in my throat. I carefully placed the phone back on the nightstand, exactly at the angle I found it. I laid back down. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would shake the bed. I looked at Brett. He let out a little snort in his sleep and rolled over, flinging an arm over his eyes. He wasn't investing our money. He wasn't protecting me from stress. He was stealing our life, and he was ordering pizza on the side. I needed proof. The text wasn't enough. If I confronted him about a Pizza Hut notification, he'd say it was a glitch or a prank or a bot. He'd say I was crazy. He'd say I was violating his privacy. He'd twist it until I was apologizing to him. I needed to see her. Monday morning, Brett put on his navy suit, the one I bought him for his promotion. He adjusted his tie in the mirror. "Big day," he said, catching my eye in the reflection. "Client meetings all day. Probably won't be home until 8 or 9. Don't wait up for dinner." "Okay," I said, sipping my coffee to hide the tremor in my lip. "Good luck." "Love you," he said, pecking me on the cheek. He smelled like peppermint and betrayal. As soon as his Audi pulled out of the driveway, I ran to the garage. I jumped into my Civic. I waited 30 seconds, counting them out loud. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. I backed out. I saw his car turning left at the stop sign at the end of the street. I turned left. I stayed 2 cars back. I felt like I was in a movie, but a really bad low-budget movie where the protagonist is wearing sweatpants and hasn't washed her hair in 2 days. He didn't turn toward the highway that led to his office. He turned right toward the city center. "Where are you going, Brett?" I whispered, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. He merged onto the boulevard. I accelerated to keep up. And then, thump, thump, thump. The steering wheel jerked violently to the left. My car shuddered. "No!" I screamed. "No, no, no!" I fought the wheel, pulling the car to the shoulder. The thumping sound was sickening. A flat tire, a catastrophic blowout. I watched Brett's Audi get smaller and smaller in the distance. He turned a corner and was gone. I sat there on the side of the road, cars whizzing past me at 40 miles per hour, shaking my car with their wake. I hit the steering wheel with my fists. I hit it until my hands hurt. I screamed a guttural animal sound that tore at my throat. I was stranded. Again. I reached for my phone to call ATA. Then I remembered. The membership was linked to the credit card. The credit card that was declined. I couldn't call AQA. I couldn't call Brett. I had to change the tire myself. I got out of the car. It had started to drizzle, a cold gray spit of rain that seemed personally directed at me. I opened the trunk and dragged out the spare. It was heavy. I broke a nail lifting the jack. I knelt on the wet asphalt, grease staining the knees of my sweatpants. I struggled with the lug nuts. They were rusted tight. I put my entire body weight on the tire iron, grunting, crying, rain mixing with the tears on my face. "I hate you," I sobbed, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to the tire or Brett or myself. I was 34 years old. I was a financial analyst. I was a good wife. And here I was, kneeling in the mud, penniless and abandoned, while my husband drove off to meet a pepperoni pizza who missed his hands. That was the moment the sadness stopped. The lug nut gave way with a screech of metal. I wiped the wet hair out of my eyes. I looked at the rusted bolt in my hand. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to find out where he went, and if I couldn't follow him forward, I would trace him backward. By the time I got the tire changed and drove home, it was noon. I was soaked, greasy, and cold, but my mind was running hot. If I couldn't track his car, and I couldn't track his phone, and I couldn't track his bank account, I had to track his physical footprint. Even digital ghosts leave trash. I went into his home office. Brett had a rule about his office. Creative chaos, he called it. He didn't like me cleaning in there. "You move my piles and I can't find anything," he would say. I closed the door and locked it. I went straight to the trash can under his desk. It was empty. Of course. He was careful. I looked around the room. Bookshelves, a generic landscape painting, his mahogany desk. I opened the top drawer, pens, paper clips, a stapler. I opened the middle drawer, files labeled Taxes 2020, House Deed, Car Insurance. All innocent, all boring. I opened the bottom drawer. It was locked. I jiggled the handle, locked tight. I looked around for a key. He usually kept a spare key in the pencil cup. I dumped the cup out onto the desk. Pens rolled everywhere. No key. He had taken the key. I went back to the trash can. I took the plastic liner out and shook it. Nothing. Wait. I felt something at the bottom of the can. Underneath the liner. I reached in. My fingers brushed against crumpled paper. I pulled it out. It was a ball of thermal receipt paper, wadded up tight about the size of a marble. He must have thrown it in, realized his mistake, and then tried to hide it under the bag instead of taking it out to the main garbage. I smoothed it out on the desk, pressing it flat with my palm. The Riverside Inn. Date, June 15th. Time, 11:42 p.m. Item, room service, champagne, strawberries, club sandwich. Total, 185 zeros. Payment method, cash. June 15th. I closed my eyes. June 15th was a Wednesday. Brett had told me he was at a mandatory team-building retreat in the mountains. He had complained about the mosquitoes. He had sent me a picture of a pine tree. He wasn't in the mountains. He was at the Riverside Inn. The Riverside Inn was a boutique hotel downtown. It was 3 miles from our house. He paid cash for room service. Who pays cash for room service? You only pay cash when you don't want a paper trail. I stared at the receipt. It was wrinkled and stained with coffee grounds, but to me, it looked like a map. I checked the timestamp again, 11:42 p.m. While I was sleeping in our bed, thinking about how sweet he was to text me photos of trees, he was 3 miles away eating a club sandwich with someone else. I folded the receipt carefully and put it in my pocket. I needed to see this place. I needed to see who worked the front desk. And I needed money to pay someone to watch him, because clearly I was terrible at it. I went to the closet in the guest bedroom. I reached up to the top shelf behind the stack of old towels and pulled down my old shoebox of zombie apocalypse money. It was a joke we had. I always kept $500 in cash just in case the grid went down. Brett used to tease me about it. If the zombies come, babe, your $20 bills won't buy you safety. I opened the box. It was empty. My breath hitched. The $500 was gone. He hadn't just locked the accounts. He hadn't just cut up the cards. He had raided my shoebox. He had stolen my emergency fund to pay for his affair. I sat down on the floor of the guest closet, holding the empty shoebox. I didn't scream this time. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, hard stone form in the center of my chest. He wanted a war? He wanted to starve me out? Okay, Brett. I reached into the very back of the shelf, inside a hollowed-out book titled Advanced Macroeconomics, that I knew Brett would never, ever open. I pulled out a thick envelope. Inside was $3,000. My real emergency fund, the one I never told him about, the one my mother told me to keep just in case you need to run. Thanks, Mom, I whispered. I put the cash in my bra. It was time to hire a professional. Monday at the office felt like being underwater. I sat at my desk, surrounded by the beige fabric of my cubicle walls, staring at a spreadsheet of quarterly projections. The numbers usually calmed me. They were logical. They followed rules, but today, the cells seemed to be vibrating. Asset allocation, liability, net loss. My heart gave a strange, hard thump against my ribs, then a flutter. I pressed my hand to my chest. It felt like a bird was trapped in there, beating its wings against the cage of my sternum. Just breathe, Victoria. You found the receipt. You have the cash. You are in control. I wasn't in control. I was terrified. Every time my phone rang, I jumped, convinced it was the bank calling to tell me we were bankrupt, or Brett calling to tell me he knew I'd raided the hollow book. My vision started to tunnel. The edges of the room went gray. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed louder, a high-pitched whine that drilled into my temples. My fingertips went numb. I stood up too fast. My chair rolled back and hit the partition with a loud thwack. "Victoria? You okay?" It was Sarah from HR. She was standing at the entrance to my cubicle, holding a mug that said Mama Bear. I tried to smile. I needed to look normal. If I didn't look normal, they would ask questions. If they asked questions, I might start crying. If I started crying, I would never stop. "I'm fine," I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from the end of a long hallway. "Just stood up too fast. Low iron." "You look pale, hun. You want some water?" "No," I managed to say. "I just need restroom." I walked past her, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. Left, right, left, right. Don't run. Running is for guilty people. I pushed into the women's restroom and locked myself in the handicap stall. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold tile floor. I put my head between my knees. I gasped for air. It felt like someone was sitting on my chest. This was it. I was having a heart attack at 34. I was going to die on a bathroom floor, and Brett would use the life insurance money to buy pizza for the girl with the hands. "He's doing this to you," a voice in my head whispered. "He made you sick. He made you doubt your own sanity." I closed my eyes and focused on the tile pattern. I forced my breathing to slow down. In, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. I wasn't dying. I was furious. And fury, I realized, as the gray edges of my vision receded, was a much better fuel than fear. I didn't call Doug from the office. I didn't call him from my cell phone. I was paranoid now. If Brett could track the grocery bill, could he see my call logs? I wasn't taking the chance. At lunch, I drove to a strip mall on the other side of town. I went into a drugstore and bought a prepaid burner phone with cash. $30 for the phone, $20 for the minutes. I sat in my car, the engine idling, the AC blasting against the summer heat. I tore open the plastic blister pack with my teeth. I powered on the cheap black plastic rectangle. I dialed the number I had memorized from the website. I looked up at the library yesterday. "Kim Investigations," a voice answered. It was gravelly, tired. "I need to hire you," I said. I didn't introduce myself. "I have a husband who travels for work but pays cash for local hotels." "I see," the voice said. "No judgment, just business. I charge $150 an hour. Retainer is $1,500 up front, cash or check." "Cash," I said. "Today. Can you meet me?" "There's a diner on 4th and Elm. Patty's Place. Be there in 40 minutes. I'm the guy in the gray windbreaker eating pie." I drove to the bank first. Not our bank, but a different branch where I didn't have an account. I walked in and asked to break 3 of my $100 bills into smaller notes, just to make sure I wasn't being followed. I was acting crazy. I knew that. But crazy was the only thing keeping me safe. I arrived at Patty's Place at 1 o'clock. It smelled like bacon grease and stale coffee. I spotted the gray windbreaker in a back booth. He was older than I expected, maybe 50, with tired eyes and a face that looked like it had been slept in. He was eating cherry pie. I slid into the booth opposite him. I didn't say hello. I reached into my purse, pulled out a white envelope containing $1,500, half my stash, and slid it across the sticky table. He didn't open it. He just put his hand over it and slid it into his lap. "Tell me," he said. "His name is Brett Sullivan. He works for Carter Logistics. He drives a silver Audi A4, license plate number." I recited it from memory. "He claims he's working late 3 nights a week. And he's locked our finances so I can't see the charges." Doug Kim nodded. He took a sip of coffee. "The financial lock is usually the last step, not the first. He's preparing for an exit, Mrs. Sullivan." Hearing it out loud made my stomach lurch. I found a receipt for the Riverside Inn. Local hookups, Doug grunted. Classic. Sloppy. I'll put a tracker on his car tonight. If he goes anywhere other than the office or home, you'll know. How long? I asked. Give me a week. If he's as active as you think, I'll have photos by Friday. I nodded. I felt a strange sense of relief. I had outsourced my paranoia. It was Doug's job now. The week passed in a blur of fake smiles and quiet terror. I cooked dinner. I asked Brett about his day. I let him kiss me goodnight, holding my breath until he rolled over. Friday came. My burner phone buzzed at 10 in the morning. Patty's place. Noon. I told my boss I had a dentist appointment. I drove to the diner. Doug was in the same booth, but this time he wasn't eating pie. He had a manila folder in front of him. I sat down. My hands were sweating. You were right, Doug said. No preamble, no, how are you? Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday lunch. He opened the folder and pushed 3 photographs toward me. The first photo was grainy, taken from a distance. It showed Brett walking out of a restaurant called Bella Rosa. He was laughing. His head was thrown back, that carefree laugh I used to love. Walking next to him was a woman. She was blonde. She was petite. She was wearing a white dress that looked expensive. She looked nice. That was the worst part. She didn't look like a vampy seductress. She looked like the kind of girl who volunteered at animal shelters and drank oat milk lattes. She looked like a younger, happier version of me, before the mortgage and the stress. The second photo was clearer. They were sitting at a table. Brett was reaching across the tablecloth. He was holding her hand. He was looking at her with an intensity that made my chest ache. It wasn't just lust, it was adoration. Her name is Ashley Fitzgerald, Doug said, reading from a small notebook. 26 years old, marketing associate at his company. She reports to the director of sales, but she works on your husband's floor. A co-worker, I whispered. He told me he was mentoring the new hires. He's mentoring her, all right, Doug said dryly. Third photo. I looked at the third photo. It was taken in the parking lot of the Riverside Inn. Brett was leaning against his car. Ashley was standing in the circle of his arms. He was kissing her forehead. It was such a tender, intimate gesture. I felt like I was going to throw up. The pie smell of the diner was suddenly overwhelming. There's more, Doug said. I ran a basic asset check. Your husband opened 3 new credit cards in the last 4 months, sent the statements to a P.O. box in the city. 3 cards? I asked. But he locked our joint accounts to save money. He locked the joint accounts to hide the fact that he's funneling cash to pay off the new cards, Doug explained. He's debt stacking, buying her things, putting it on new plastic, and using your joint income to pay the minimums. He's building a life with her on your dime, Mrs. Sullivan. I stared at the girl in the white dress. Ashley, 26. She had no idea I existed. Or maybe she did, and she didn't care. Can I keep these? I asked, my voice trembling. You paid for them, Doug said. They're yours. My next stop was not home. It was a law office in a glass building downtown. Patricia, my best friend from college, was a corporate lawyer, but she had referred me to a colleague named Paige who specialized in high-conflict divorces. Paige was terrifying. She had hair cut so sharp it could cut glass and a suit that cost more than my car. I laid the photos and Doug's report on her mahogany desk. He's cheating, I said. I want a divorce, and I want to ruin him. Paige didn't blink. She looked at the photos, then at me. Okay, let's talk about the ruin him part later. First, let's talk about survival. You live in a no-fault state. The court doesn't care that he's sleeping with Bambi here. They care about assets and debts. He has 3 secret credit cards, I said, and he's locked me out of our savings. Paige leaned forward. That's the problem. In this state, debt incurred during the marriage is often considered community property. If he racks up $50,000 on credit cards buying her jewelry, you could be on the hook for half of it. What? I stood up. That's not fair. I didn't spend it. Fair is a place where they judge pigs, Victoria, Paige said sharply. This is court. If his name is on the card and you're married, it's marital debt. However, she paused, tapping a silver pen against her chin. However, I prompted, you mentioned he added you as an authorized user to his old cards? The ones he cut up? Yes, there are 10 of them. We got them for the airline miles years ago. Are you the primary account holder or just an authorized user? Authorized user. He always managed the applications. Paige smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a shark smile. That's good, she said. Authorized users have no legal liability for the debt. You can spend, but you don't have to pay. The primary account holder is solely responsible, but he can also remove you at any time. He already cut the cards, I said. But did he remove you from the account? Paige asked. Cutting the plastic doesn't change the database. If you're still in the system, you still have power, but we can't use it yet. If we file for divorce now, the judge will freeze all assets and debts. We need to be strategic. So, what do? You wait, Paige said. You let him think he's winning. You let him think you're stupid. Let him plan his exit. We need him to get sloppy. We need him to think he's safely moved on so he agrees to a quick, clean divorce. We need him to sign a settlement that gives you immunity from his debts. And then... She let the sentence hang in the air. Then we drop the hammer, she said. But you have to be an actress, Victoria. Can you do that? Can you go home and sleep next to him and not stab him with a fork? I thought about the way he looked at Ashley in the photo. I thought about the Pizza Hut message. I can do it, I said. I can be an actress. I beat him home by 20 minutes. I hid the photos in the hollowed-out advanced macroeconomics book, right next to my dwindling stack of cash. When Brett walked through the door at 7:30, I was stirring pasta sauce. The kitchen smelled like garlic and normalcy. Hey, babe, he called out. He sounded cheerful, too cheerful. He walked into the kitchen holding a plastic-wrapped bouquet of carnations, the kind you buy at a gas station for $5. The edges of the petals were already turning brown. For you, he said, presenting them with a flourish. Just because. My stomach turned. Oh, Brett. They're lovely. I took them. I had to force myself not to throw them in the disposal. I put them in a vase. I know it's not roses, he said, loosening his tie, but I'm really trying to maximize that trust fund contribution this month. Every dollar counts, right? We have to sacrifice now for the luxury later. Right, I said, the lake house. He walked over to the fridge to get a beer. As he reached for the handle, his sleeve rode up. There was a watch on his wrist. A new watch. It was a Tag Heuer. I knew watches. I worked in finance. That watch cost at least $3,000. Maybe $4,000. He saw me looking. He quickly pulled his sleeve down. Is that new? I asked, keeping my voice light. What? Oh, this? He laughed, a nervous, tinny sound. No, this is a knockoff. One of the guys at the office knows a guy in Chinatown. $20. Looks real, though, doesn't it? Yeah, I said, looking at the sapphire crystal face that caught the light perfectly. It looks very real. It's about image, Vic, he said, taking a long swig of beer. Clients need to see success, but we know the truth, right? We're saving. We're saving, I echoed. I turned back to the pasta sauce so he wouldn't see the tears of rage pricking my eyes. He was wearing $4,000 on his wrist while I was struggling to pay for spinach, and he brought me dying carnations to cover his tracks. You're so good to me, he said, coming up behind me and kissing my neck. I gripped the wooden spoon so hard I thought it might snap. The act lasted for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of Pizza Hut notifications. 3 weeks of working late. 3 weeks of me smiling until my jaw ached. Then, on a Tuesday evening, always Tuesdays, he sat me down in the living room. He turned off the TV. He had that look on his face. The I'm a good guy doing a hard thing look. Victoria, he said softly, we need to talk. I put down my book. I knew this was it. My heart started hammering, not from fear this time, but from anticipation. "What is it, Brett?" He sighed. He looked at his hands that the pizza app missed so much. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began. "About us. About you." "Me?" "Yes. You're not happy, Victoria. I can see it. You're always anxious. You're always worrying about money. You're stressed all the time." "I'm stressed because," I started to say, "because you locked the bank accounts." But I stopped myself. "I'm just a worrier, Brett." "You know that." "Exactly," he said, leaning forward earnestly. "And I think I'm the cause of it. I think this marriage is suffocating you. I think you need to find yourself again. You used to be so fun. Now you're just rigid." I stared at him. He was blaming me. He was cheating on me with a 26-year-old, stealing my money and gaslighting me about expenses. And he had the audacity to say I was the problem. "So, what are you saying?" I asked. "I think we need to separate," he said. His voice was thick with fake emotion. "I'm doing this for you, Victoria. I'm setting you free. You deserve to be with someone who makes you feel safe. And I deserve to be happy too. We've grown apart. We're roommates." "Is there someone else?" I asked. I had to ask. It was part of the script. He looked me dead in the eye. "No, absolutely not. This is about us. This is about two people who care enough about each other to let go. Liar. Sociopathic liar." "I see," I said. I looked down at my lap. I summoned every ounce of pain I had felt in the last month. I let my shoulders slump. I let a single tear roll down my cheek. "Maybe you're right," I whispered. "I have been unhappy." He looked relieved. He actually smiled. "I knew you'd understand. You're so sensible, Vic. That's what I've always respected about you." "So, what now?" I asked. "I found a place," he said quickly. Too quickly. "Just a small apartment in the city. I can move out this weekend. We can keep it civil. No lawyers, right? We can just split everything 50-50 and go our separate ways. We're adults." "No lawyers," I repeated. "Great," he said, patting my knee. "I'll start packing." He stood up, looking 10 pounds lighter. He thought he had pulled off the perfect crime. He thought he had convinced me that he was the martyr falling on the sword for my happiness. I watched him walk up the stairs. "You want 50-50, Brett?" I thought. "I'll give you 50-50. You get the debt. I get the justice." The next morning, the house felt like a stage set where the play had already been canceled, but the actors were still forced to say their lines. Brett was moving around the kitchen with an offensive amount of energy, humming to himself as he poured granola into a bowl. "So," he said, not looking at me, "I was thinking, since we're doing this the easy way, I'll just take the guest bedroom furniture. You keep the master suite. That seems fair, right?" I gripped my coffee mug with both hands to keep them from shaking. The guest bedroom set was solid oak. My grandfather had refinished it by hand. It was the only thing in this house that had a soul. "Say no," my brain screamed. "Tell him he can't have the oak. Tell him he can sleep on an air mattress in his mistress's living room." But Paige's voice was in my ear. "Be the victim. Let him think he's robbing you. If he thinks he's winning, he won't look at the fine print." "That sounds generous, Brett," I said. The words tasted like ash. "Thank you. I know you could ask for more." He turned to me, his face softened by that toxic pity. "I'm not trying to strip you bare, Vic. I want you to be comfortable. I'll take the espresso machine, too. You never use it anyway." I nodded slowly. I stared into my black coffee. The espresso machine cost $2,000. I had saved for 3 months to buy it for his 30th birthday. "Okay," I whispered, "take the machine." "You're taking this really well," he said, leaning against the counter. "I was worried you'd get hysterical." My blood boiled. Hysterical. The word men used to dismiss women who had the audacity to feel pain. I wanted to throw the mug at his head. I wanted to scream that I knew about Ashley, about the debt, about the lies. Instead, I looked up at him with wide, watery eyes. I just want it to be over, Brett. I'm tired of fighting for something that doesn't want me. He smiled, a relieved, predatory smile. That's the spirit. We'll be happier apart. You'll see. Saturday arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. Brett had rented a U-Haul. He was moving boxes with a frantic efficiency, sweating through his t-shirt. I stood in the hallway holding a roll of packing tape. My job was to tape the boxes. His job was to carry them out and leave my life forever. "Can you label this one office?" he grunted, hoisting a heavy box of books. I ripped a piece of tape off the roll. Scritch. I smoothed it onto the cardboard. I picked up the Sharpie. Office. I watched him walk out the front door. I needed to know where he was going. He had said a small apartment in the city, but he refused to give me the address until he was settled. Find out. The voice in my head urged. Don't let him leave without a lead. I looked at the pile of boxes remaining. There was a small open box on the floor near his gym bag. Inside, amidst a tangle of charging cables and socks, was a glossy brochure. I glanced at the door. He was at the truck. I had 10 seconds. I dropped to my knees. I reached into the box. I pulled out the brochure. The Marina Towers, waterfront luxury living. My heart stopped. The Marina Towers. I knew that building. It was brand new. It was glass and steel and sat right on the harbor. A one-bedroom there started at $4,000 a month. How? How was a man who claimed we needed to save money for a lake house, a man who locked me out of our accounts to maximize interest, affording a $4,000 a month apartment? Footsteps on the porch. I shoved the brochure back into the box, burying it under a pair of running socks. I stood up just as Brett walked in. Almost done, he panted, wiping his forehead. Hey, could you grab my parking pass from the counter? I need it for the new garage. I walked to the kitchen counter. There was a gray plastic hang tag. Marina Towers, resident parking, Zone A. I picked it up. It felt heavy in my hand. It was proof. He wasn't downsizing. He was upgrading. And he was doing it with money that didn't exist, or money he had stolen. Here you go, I said, handing it to him. Thanks, he said, snatching it. This place has strict security. Don't want to get towed on move-in day. He didn't notice that my hands were ice cold. He didn't notice the look in my eyes. He only saw the compliant, broken wife handing him the keys to his new paradise. 2 days later, I met Doug in the parking lot of a Home Depot. It felt safer than the diner, less chance of running into anyone we knew. We sat in his sedan with the engine running. Marina Towers, Doug said, shaking his head. Your husband has expensive taste for a guy on a logistics salary. He moved in on Saturday, I said. I saw the pass. Is Ashley living there? She's not on the lease, Doug said. I pulled the property records. The lease is in his name only, but her car has been parked in his spot for 2 nights running. Silver Mercedes. She practically lives there. The rent is $4,000, I said. I checked the website. Doug, where's he getting the money? We make good money, but not carry 2 households in a luxury waterfront condo money. Doug tapped a finger on the steering wheel. That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Or maybe the $100,000 question. I did some digging into his credit. And those 3 secret cards I told you about? They're maxed out. $30,000 in debt. But he's making the minimum payments. And the deposit for the apartment? He paid that with a cashier's check. From our joint account? No, that's the weird part. Your joint account hasn't moved. I have a contact at the bank who gave me a peek. The balance is steady. He's getting cash from somewhere else. I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. He's not using our savings. Not the visible savings, Doug said. Is there any other source? An inheritance? A loan? His parents are comfortable, I said. His dad, Robert, owns the logistics company Brett works for. But Robert is old school. He wouldn't fund an affair. He hates divorce. He thinks marriage is a sacred contract. Maybe Daddy doesn't know what he's funding, Doug suggested. Keep your eyes open, Mrs. Sullivan. If the money isn't coming from you and it's not coming from his salary, he's bleeding someone else dry. The house was too quiet without him. The silence felt heavy, pressing against my eardrums. I spent my evenings pacing the living room, waiting for something. On Wednesday, the mail arrived. Usually, Brett grabbed the mail the second he walked in the door. He was obsessive about it. "I'll sort it," he would say. "You don't need to worry about the bills." Now, he wasn't here to intercept it. I walked to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. The sun was shining, birds were singing. It was disgusting. I pulled out a stack of envelopes, junk mail, a catalog, a bill for the electric company, and a thick white envelope from First National Business Banking. It was addressed to Mr. Brett Sullivan, C.O. Sullivan Logistics, 124 Maple Drive, our address. I frowned. Why was business mail coming to our house? And why was it from a bank I didn't recognize? I took it inside. I sat at the kitchen table. "It's a federal crime to open someone else's mail," my conscience whispered. "It's a moral crime to bankrupt your wife and sleep with your subordinate," my rage whispered back. I went to the stove. I filled the tea kettle with water and set it on the burner. I waited until it whistled, sending a plume of hot steam into the air. I held the envelope over the steam, just like I'd seen in old movies. The paper curled slightly. The glue dampened. My fingers burned, but I didn't pull away. Slowly, carefully, I peeled the flap open. I pulled out the document. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a notice of approval for a business line of credit. Borrower, Sullivan Logistics, Inc. Guarantor, Robert Sullivan, Brett Sullivan. Amount $50,000. Date, August 15th. My breath hitched. $50,000? I scanned the document. It was a loan taken out against the business, but it was mailed to our house, not the office. If this was a legitimate business loan, why send it here? Robert had an office manager. He had an accountant. He had a headquarters, unless Robert didn't know about it. I ran upstairs to the closet where I kept the old greeting cards. I was sentimental. I kept everything. I dug through a shoebox until I found a birthday card from 2 years ago. Happy birthday, Victoria. Love, Robert and Helen. I took the card downstairs. I laid it on the table next to the loan document. I looked at the signature on the card. Robert had a very distinct signature. It was spiky, aggressive, with a sharp loop on the R and a heavy underline. It looked like barbed wire. I looked at the signature on the loan document. It said Robert Sullivan. It had the loop. It had the underline. But it was shaky. The ink flow was uneven, like the pen had hesitated. The loop on the R was too round, too careful. It looked like someone drawing a signature, not writing one. I looked at Brett's signature next to it as the co-signer. It was fluid, confident, fast. I closed my eyes. The pieces clicked together with a sickening sound. The luxury apartment, the expensive dinners, the Tag Heuer watch, the maxed-out credit cards. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was embezzling from his father. He was taking out loans in the company's name, forging his dad's signature, and diverting the funds to his own personal accounts to pay for his new life with Ashley. He was stealing from his own family. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to put my head between my knees. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was a felony. If I exposed him, I wouldn't just be ending his marriage. I would be sending him to prison. I looked at the empty spot on the counter where the espresso machine used to be. I thought about the Pizza Hut message. I thought about the way he looked at me when he said, "I'm doing this for you." He didn't care if he destroyed me, I thought. He didn't care if he left me with debt. Why should I care if he goes to jail? I took a picture of the loan document. Then I carefully resealed the envelope with a glue stick and placed it in the Brett's mail pile I was legally required to keep for him. That night, I couldn't sleep. The knowledge of the forgery was buzzing in my brain like a wasp. If he was reckless enough to forge a signature, what else was he reckless about? I opened my laptop. It was 2 a.m. I went to the Carter Logistics employee portal. I still had access because I was on his health insurance. The password for the benefits site was different from the bank. Thank God he was lazy. I logged in. Welcome, Brett Sullivan. I didn't care about the dental plan. I navigated to the bottom of the page. Company resources. Employee handbook. I clicked the PDF. It took forever to load. My internet was being slow, or maybe the universe was giving me one last chance to turn back. I hit Ctrl+F. I typed relationship. Search results, 0. I typed fraternization. Search results, 1. I clicked it. Section 4.2, workplace relationships and conflict of interest. I read the text. It was standard corporate speak, boring and dense, until I got to the 3rd paragraph. Strict prohibition on reporting lines. No employee shall enter into a romantic or sexual relationship with a subordinate within their direct chain of command. Failure to disclose such a relationship immediately to human resources will result in immediate termination. Immediate termination. Doug had told me Ashley reported to the director of sales, but she was in Brett's division. I needed to know the org chart. I clicked on the Organization tab. There was Brett, Senior Director of Operations. Below him were 3 managers. One of them was Michael Tate, Sales Manager. Below Michael Tate was Ashley Fitzgerald, Marketing Associate. She wasn't his direct report. She was his report's report. She was 2 levels down, but she was definitely in his chain of command. He had power over her bonus. He had power over her promotion, and he hadn't disclosed it. I knew he hadn't. Because if he had disclosed it, HR would have moved her to a different department immediately to avoid a lawsuit. He was sleeping with a subordinate, funding it with embezzled money, and lying to everyone. I sat back in the dark, the blue light of the laptop illuminating my face. I had the leverage. I had the nuclear codes. Now I just had to wait for him to press the button. The conference room at Page's law firm smelled like lemon polish and intimidation. I sat on one side of the long glass table, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my fingernails were leaving crescents in my palms. Page sat next to me, a monolith of calm in a charcoal suit. Brett walked in 10 minutes late. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a blazer, the uniform of the cool tech guy he desperately wanted to be. He looked around the room with a bemused smile, like he was touring a museum of ancient history. "Wow," he said, pulling out a chair. "This is intense, Vic. I thought we were keeping this friendly. Did we really need the ivory tower treatment?" "It's standard procedure, Brett," I said, my voice steady, "just to make sure the paperwork is filed correctly. You know how the courts are." Right, he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Bureaucracy. I get it." He didn't bring a lawyer. He had told me he didn't want to waste money on sharks when we already agreed on everything. It was the ultimate arrogance. He thought he could outsmart a legal system he didn't understand because he had successfully hidden an affair for 6 months. Page slid a thick stack of documents across the glass. It made a heavy thud. "This is the marital settlement agreement," Page said. Her voice was devoid of emotion. "It outlines the division of assets as discussed. You keep the apartment lease. Victoria keeps the house and assumes the mortgage. You split the liquid savings. No spousal support." Brett picked up a pen. DA. He flipped the first page. He scanned it. "Don't read it." I prayed silently. "Just sign it. Just look at me and think I'm weak and sign the damn paper." "Seems standard," he muttered. He looked up at me. "You look tired, Vic. Are you sleeping? You have those dark circles again." It was a jab masquerading as concern. Toxic benevolence. "I'm fine," I said, "just ready to move forward." "Me too," he said with a sigh. "I worry about you, alone in that big house. It's a lot to manage. If you ever need help with the gutters or anything, you can call me. We're still friends." I felt bile rise in my throat. He was offering to clean my gutters while he was stealing my future. "Thanks, Brett," I said. "Can we sign? I have to get back to work." He flipped to page 12. This was the dangerous page. This was where Paige had buried the allocation of debt clause. It stated that each party shall be solely responsible for any and all debts incurred on credit accounts held in their primary name, regardless of authorized user status, effective immediately upon dissolution. It meant that if he was the primary account holder on those credit cards, which he was, and I removed myself as a user, the entire mountain of debt he had built would crash down on him alone. He paused on page 12. My heart stopped. He squinted at a paragraph. "What's this about indemnification?" he asked. Paige didn't blink. "Standard liability language. It protects both of you from future lawsuits regarding the property. If a tree falls on the house tomorrow, Brett isn't liable. If you slip in your apartment, Victoria isn't liable." It was a half-truth, a beautiful, lawyerly half-truth. "Ah," Brett said. "Makes sense." He signed. He signed page 12. He signed page 15. He signed the final page with a flourish. "Done," he said, capping the pen. He looked at me with a pitying smile. "End of an era, huh? I really hope you find happiness, Victoria. You deserve someone who gets you." "I hope you find what you're looking for, too," I said. "I hope you find a prison cell comfortable," I thought. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of the law firm, shaking. The adrenaline crash was hitting me hard. I had the signed papers in my bag. It was over, but it wasn't finished. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I picked it up. A notification from Instagram. "Ashley Fitz has requested to follow you." I stared at the screen. Ashley, the mistress, the girl in the white dress. Why? Why would she follow the ex-wife? Was it curiosity? Was she checking to see if I was fat? Was she trying to see if I knew? Or was it pure, unadulterated arrogance? She had the man. Now she wanted to survey the conquered territory. My thumb hovered over the delete button. "Don't do it," I told myself. "Block her." But curiosity is a poison. I needed to know. If I accepted, she could see my life. But if I accepted, I could see hers. Her profile was private. This was my only way in. I took a deep breath. Confirm. Then I requested to follow her back. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Ping. "Ashley Fitz accepted your follow request. She wanted me to see. She wanted an audience." I clicked on her profile. It was a curated shrine to living your best life. Photos of acai bowls, photos of sunsets, photos of her legs by a pool. And then the most recent post, posted 2 hours ago. A photo of 2 hands holding champagne glasses. One hand was hers, manicured with pale pink polish. The other hand was a man's hand, a hand wearing a Tag Heuer watch, a hand I had held for 11 years. Caption, "New beginnings with my favorite person. Blessed soulmate finally." I felt a tear slide down my cheek, not of sadness, of clarity. She didn't know he was broke. She didn't know he was a thief. She thought she had won the lottery. I scrolled down. 1 week ago. A video. It was a boomerang of her hand, twisting back and forth under a restaurant light. On her ring finger sat a diamond the size of a grape. It was an oval cut set in platinum, surrounded by a halo of smaller diamonds. Caption, "A million times yes. I can't wait to be Mrs. Sullivan." I froze. Mrs. Sullivan. She was taking my name. I zoomed in on the ring. I knew jewelry. That wasn't a cubic zirconia. That was at least 2 carats. Maybe 3. That was a $20,000 ring. Where did he get $20,000? The business loan? The credit cards? I needed to know which account he used. If he used the joint checking, the one he locked me out of, I was still liable until the divorce decree was stamped by the judge, which wouldn't happen for another 3 days. I opened the Credit Karma app on my phone. I couldn't log into the bank, but I could log into my own credit report. Since I was an authorized user on his cards, his debt was reported on my history. I typed in my password. Fingerprint ID. The wheel spun. Total debt, $42,500. My breath hitched. Last month it had been $4,000. I clicked on Accounts. Chase Sapphire, authorized user. Balance $18,900. Limit $20,000. Status, near limit. There it was, the ring. He had put the engagement ring on the Chase card, the card I was an authorized user on, the card that, legally, was currently impacting my credit score. My score had dropped 40 points. I stared at the red numbers. He had financed her promise of forever on a piece of plastic that had my name attached to it. The audacity was breathtaking. He was literally making me pay for his engagement to his mistress. I took a screenshot. 3 days, I thought. In 3 days, the judge signs the order, and then I make a phone call. Friday came. The email from Paige arrived at 9:00 a.m. Subject, Final Decree. Body. Attached is the signed divorce decree. Congratulations, Victoria. You are officially single. I didn't celebrate. I didn't open a bottle of wine. I sat down at my kitchen table with my phone, a notepad, and a cup of black coffee. It was time to detonate the bombs. I dialed the number on the back of the old Chase card I had dug out of a drawer. Thank you for calling Chase. For English, press 1. I pressed 1. Please enter your 16-digit card number. I entered it. We're sorry, that card number has been reported lost or stolen. Please hold for a representative. He had reported it stolen when he cut it up. Of course. I waited. The hold music was a smooth jazz saxophone that sounded like it was being played underwater. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Chase Customer Service, this is Brenda. How can I help you? Hi, Brenda, I said, keeping my voice bright and efficient. My name is Victoria Sullivan. I am an authorized user on account ending in 4598. The primary holder is Brett Sullivan. Okay, let me pull that up. Verification? I gave her my social security number. The hard way, no shortcuts. Thank you, I see the account here. How can I help? I need to remove myself as an authorized user, effective immediately. There was a pause, the typing of keys. Okay, Brenda said. I can do that for you. Just so you know, this will remove the account history from your credit report within 30 to 60 days, and your card will no longer work. That's exactly what I want, I said. And Brenda, can you tell me the current balance on the account? I can't give specific transaction details to an authorized user, she recited the script, but the total balance is $18,942. Thank you, I said. Please process the removal. Done. Is there anything else? No, that's all. I hung up. I drew a line through Chase on my notepad. 1 down, 2 to go. I called American Express. Same process, same hold music, same result. I called Citibank. By noon, I had severed myself from $42,000 of debt. Technically, the debt was still there, but it was no longer mine. It belonged entirely, 100% to Brett. And since he had maxed out the cards to buy the ring and furnish the apartment, and since I had just cut off his ability to use my creditworthiness to float the balances, when the bills came due next month, he was going to be in for a very rude awakening. I needed coffee. Real coffee, not the sludge I made at home. I walked to the cafe on the corner, feeling lighter than I had in months. As I pushed open the glass door, I froze. Robert Sullivan was standing at the counter ordering a black coffee. Brett's dad. The man who had welcomed me into the family. The man whose signature his son had forged. I couldn't turn around. He had already seen me. Victoria, he said. His voice was cool. Not angry, just disappointed. "Hello, Robert," I said, trying to keep my chin up. He took his cup from the barista and turned to me. He looked older, tired. "I heard the papers were signed," he said. "Yes, this morning?" He shook his head. "I have to say I was surprised. I always thought you had more fight in you, Victoria. 11 years. You just let him walk away?" The injustice of it hit me like a slap. He thought I gave up? He thought I was the weak one? "It's complicated, Robert," I said carefully. "Is it?" He sighed. "Brett told me. He said you were distant, obsessed with work. He said you stopped being a wife a long time ago." My jaw tightened. Brett had poisoned the well. He had painted me as the cold career woman so he could be the victim. "Brett says a lot of things," I said. "Sometimes people aren't who you think they are." "He's my son," Robert said sharply. "He's a good man. He's made mistakes, sure, but he's trying to build a future. I just wish you had supported him more." "Supported him?" I wanted to scream. "I supported him while he stole $50,000 from your company." But I couldn't say it. Not yet. If I told Robert now, he might cover for Brett. He might pay off the loan to avoid the scandal. I needed the trap to snap shut publicly. I needed the consequences to be irreversible. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Robert," I said. "I really am." He looked at me with disdain. "Goodbye, Victoria." He walked out. I watched him go. "You defend him now, Robert," I thought. "Wait until you see the forensic accounting report I'm going to drop on your table." That night, I went back to Instagram. Ashley was posting again. She was a machine. Story update. A photo of a creamy white invitation. Save the date. October 14th, Bayside Manor. Bayside Manor. I knew Bayside Manor. It was the most expensive venue in the state. It was an old Gilded Age mansion right on the cliffs. It cost $20,000 just to unlock the doors. October 14th. That was 6 weeks away. They were rushing it. Why? Maybe she was pregnant? Or maybe Brett just wanted to lock it down before the financial house of cards collapsed. I opened a new tab on my laptop. Bayside Manor wedding packages. Gold package, $250 per head. Platinum package, $350 per head. Ashley posted another photo, a tasting menu. Lobster bisque and filet mignon, only the best for our guests. Platinum package. I did the math. She had posted about having 300 of our closest friends. 300 guests times $350. That was $105,000, just for food and venue, plus the ring, $20K, plus the dress, plus the flowers. Where was the money coming from? The credit cards were maxed. The business loan was $50K. That wasn't enough. Then I saw the comment on her post. User, Brett's mom, Helen. Comment, so beautiful. We are so happy to help make this day perfect for you both. I stared at the screen. His parents were paying. Robert and Helen were paying for the wedding. But Robert had just told me Brett was building a future. He didn't seem like a man who had just written a $100,000 check. Robert was frugal. He was a depression mentality kind of guy. He made us pay for our own rehearsal dinner. Why would he pay for this lavish affair for a second marriage after a 6-month relationship? Unless Brett lied to them too. Unless Brett told them it was a small, intimate gathering, got a check for maybe $20,000, and then told the venue to bill the rest to who? I remembered the business loan. Maybe he was telling the vendors, "My dad is paying, put it on the corporate account." And maybe, just maybe, he was forging authorizations there too. I needed to be at that wedding. I didn't just want to watch. I wanted to be the one to deliver the bill. I sat on the floor of my living room surrounded by a sea of paper, spreadsheets, sticky notes, printouts of the loan document, and the screenshots of the credit card balances. I felt like that meme of the guy connecting red strings on a corkboard. But this wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was an autopsy of a financial suicide. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. Let's do the math. I punched the numbers into my calculator. Credit card debt, $42,500. Forged business loan, $50,000. Apartment deposit and rent, $8,000. Engagement ring, $20,000. Subtotal, $120,500. Now, the wedding. Bayside Manor, 300 guests, platinum package, estimated cost, $105,000. Grand total, $225,000. Brett made $110,000 a year before taxes. There was a deficit of over $100,000. How was he paying the vendors? I looked at the date on the Bayside Manor contract sample I had found online. Final payment due 48 hours before the event. That was Thursday. If he used the credit cards to pay the final balance, I checked the credit card limits again. Chase, $20,000 limit. Balance, $18,000. Available, $2,000. Amex, $15,000 limit. Balance, $14,000. Available, $1,000. He didn't have the credit, unless he was banking on the authorized user status. Maybe he thought he could call the bank and say, "Hey, increase my limit, my wife has great credit." But I wasn't his wife anymore, and I wasn't on the account. If he tried to run those cards on Thursday for the wedding balance, they would decline. And if they declined, Bayside Manor wouldn't open the doors. But the wedding was still on. Ashley was posting photos of the rehearsal dinner. So how did he pay? Then I saw it, a sticky note I had made earlier. Check kiting. He wrote a check. He wrote a check from the business account, the one he had access to for deposits only. He likely forged Robert's signature on a massive company check to pay the venue, hoping to cover it with cash gifts from the wedding before the check cleared. It was a gamble. A massive, illegal gamble, and I was about to fold his hand. It was Friday night, the night before the wedding. I was printing the final piece of my arsenal, the HR package for Carter Logistics. I had drafted a cover letter to the Vice President of Human Resources. It was professional, detached, and deadly. Dear Miss Vance, attached, please find documentation regarding a violation of Section 4.2 of the Employee Handbook by Mr. Brett Sullivan. I hit print. Whirr. Chunk. The printer stopped. An orange light started blinking. Paper jam. No, I groaned. Not now. I opened the tray. The paper was crinkled, jammed deep into the rollers. I pulled. It tore. A tiny scrap of white paper remained stuck in the gears. I spent 45 minutes with a pair of tweezers and a flashlight, performing surgery on a Canon inkjet. I was sweating. My hands were covered in toner ink. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the printer through the window. The hard way, I told myself. Nothing worth doing is easy. Finally, with a microscopic tug, the scrap came free. I reprinted. The pages slid out, warm and crisp. 1. The cover letter. 2. The org chart showing Ashley and his chain of command. 3. The photos of them together during work hours. 4. The Pizza Hut chat logs, transcribed. I put them in a thick envelope. I sealed it. I stamped it. I wasn't mailing it. Mailing it would take too long. I was going to hand-deliver it to the reception desk on Monday morning, but first I had a wedding to attend. Saturday morning, the sky was a perfect, insulting blue. I drove to a boutique in the city that I usually avoided because the salesgirls looked at you like you were dirt if you weren't wearing designer shoes. Today, I didn't care. I walked in. I need a dress, I told the girl at the counter. Red, not maroon, not burgundy. Fire engine red. She pulled one off the rack. It was silk. It had a slit up the leg and a neckline that plunged just enough to be dangerous. I tried it on. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like the sad, anxious wife who worried about spinach prices. I looked like a woman who had survived a fire and decided to wear the flames. It cost $400. I paid cash. Back home, I did my makeup. I didn't have money for a professional, so I watched 3 YouTube tutorials on revenge makeup. I applied the winged liner with the steady hand of a sniper. I painted my lips a shade called Russian red. I put the folder, the one with the loan forgery and the credit card removal confirmations, into a matching red clutch. I looked at myself one last time. Showtime, Victoria. I arrived at Bayside Manor at 6:30. The cocktail hour was in full swing on the lawn. I could hear the clinking of glasses and the sound of a string quartet playing a violin cover of a pop song. I parked my Civic a quarter-mile down the road behind a row of hedges. I didn't want the valet to recognize my car. I walked up the long gravel driveway. My heels crunched on the stones. There was a security checkpoint at the main gate. A burly guy in a black suit with a clipboard. "Name?" he asked, not looking up. "Victoria," I said. "I'm with the band." He looked up. He looked at my dress. He looked at the red clutch. "The band set up 2 hours ago, ma'am." "I know," I lied smoothly. "I'm the vocalist for the second set, jazz standards. I got stuck in traffic. If I don't get in there, the bride is going to kill you, and then she's going to kill me." He hesitated. He looked at his list. There was no Victoria under the band section. "I don't see you here." "Look," I said, stepping closer, lowering my voice. "Do you really want to be the guy who tells Ashley Fitzgerald that her At Last solo didn't happen because you were checking paperwork? I'm late. Let me in." He glanced at the party, then back at me. The dress was doing a lot of the work. I looked like I belonged on a stage. "Go ahead," he grunted. "Side entrance." "Thanks," I said. I didn't go to the side entrance. I walked straight through the front gates and slipped into the crowd. The reception was held in a massive white tent on the lawn. Crystal chandeliers hung from the canvas ceiling. The centerpieces were explosions of white roses and hydrangeas. I stayed in the back near the bar. I ordered a sparkling water. I watched. Brett and Ashley were at the head table. They looked like royalty. Ashley was laughing, throwing her head back. Brett was toasting with champagne. Robert stood up. He tapped his glass with a spoon. "Attention, everyone," Robert boomed. The crowd quieted. "I'd like to say a few words about my son." I moved. I started walking through the tables. My red dress was a beacon in the sea of black tuxedos and pastel gowns. Heads turned. Whispers started. "Who is that? Is that the ex-wife?" "Oh my God." Robert saw me. He froze mid-sentence. His mouth hung open. "Victoria?" he said into the microphone. The sound echoed through the tent. Brett stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" The silence was absolute. Even the ocean seemed to stop crashing. I walked right up to the head table. I didn't climb the stage. I just stood there, looking up at them. "Hello, Brett," I said. My voice was calm, conversational. "Hello, Ashley. Robert." "Security!" Brett yelled, his face turning a blotchy red. "Get her out of here." "I'm leaving," I said, raising my hand. "I just wanted to drop off a wedding gift." I opened my red clutch. I pulled out the manila folder. "You see, Brett," I said, loud enough for the first 5 tables to hear clearly. "I was worried about you. I know how stressed you get about money. You're always locking accounts and cutting cards." "Victoria, stop," he hissed. "So," I continued, "I wanted to let you know that I helped you out. As of this morning, I removed myself from all 10 of our joint credit cards. The ones you used to buy that beautiful ring, and the ones you tried to use to pay for this venue." Ashley looked at her ring, then at Brett. "And Robert," I said, turning to his father, "I have a gift for you too." I pulled out the loan document, the one with the shaky signature. "I found this in our mail. It's a business loan for $50,000. Taken out against your company. I noticed the signature looked a little off. I thought you might want to double check it with your bank before the audit comes." I placed the folder on the table, right next to the wedding cake. "Oh," I added, turning back to Brett, "and since you're so big on company policy, I dropped a little package off at HR this morning, section 4.2. You know the one." Brett looked like he was having a stroke. He was gripping the table, his knuckles white. "You're crazy," he croaked. "No, Brett," I smiled. "I'm debt-free." For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then the chaos started. Robert snatched the folder. He ripped it open. He looked at the loan document. His face went from purple to gray. "You signed my name?" Robert roared, his voice shaking with a rage I had never heard before. "You stole from the company?" "Dad, no, it's a mistake," Brett stammered. "Don't lie to me." Robert slammed his hand on the table. "This is $50,000. And the check for the venue? Did you forge that too?" At the mention of the check, the venue coordinator, a woman with a headset who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward. She looked panicked. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, "if there is an issue with the payment—" Ashley stood up. She looked at Brett. Her eyes were wide, terrified. "Brett," she whispered, "what is she talking about? What loan? The cards? You said you had the money." "I do," Brett yelled. "She's lying. She's just a jealous, bitter ex-wife." "Check your phone, Brett," I said softly. He looked at me. "Check your banking app," I said. I removed myself on Thursday. The credit limit dropped. The authorization for the bar tab? It probably just declined. He fumbled for his phone. He tapped the screen. I saw the color drain from his face. He looked up at me. His eyes were dead. He knew. "It's gone," he whispered. "The line of credit, it's gone." "Ashley," Robert said, his voice cold as ice, "did you know about this?" "No," Ashley screamed, backing away from Brett like he was contagious. "He told me he was rich. He told me his trust fund was paying for everything." "I don't have a trust fund," Brett yelled, snapping. "I spend it all on you, on your ring, on the stupid party." The crowd gasped. Phones were out. People were recording. This was going to be on TikTok in 10 minutes. I watched them turn on each other. The toxic benevolence was gone. It was just toxicity now. "I think my work here is done," I said. I turned around. I walked back down the aisle, past the staring guests, past the security guard who looked confused, and out into the cool night air. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I walked to my car, took off my heels, and drove home in my bare feet. I stopped at a drive-thru on the way. I ordered a large fries and a chocolate shake. It was the best meal I had ever tasted. Life is quiet now. The good kind of quiet. I got a promotion at work. I'm leading the new analytics division. I bought a new espresso machine, a better one. As for Brett, the fallout was nuclear. Robert didn't press charges for the forgery, but he fired Brett immediately. He also liquidated Brett's 401k to pay back the company and the vendors. Brett is currently unemployed and living in a studio apartment above a garage. The wedding venue sued him for the unpaid balance. He had to declare bankruptcy. Ashley annulled the marriage 2 weeks later. She cited fraud. She also kept the ring, claiming it was a gift. But since Brett had financed it on a card that defaulted, the repo men are currently looking for it. Last I heard, she transferred to a different branch in Ohio to escape the rumors. I still have the red dress. It hangs in the back of my closet. Sometimes, when I'm feeling stressed about a bill or a deadline, I go look at it. I touch the silk. And I remember that I'm not the woman who cries over spinach anymore. I'm the woman who brought the receipt. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.